The crystal chandeliers of the Astoria Grand Ballroom didn't just light the room, they exposed every secret. Among the city's elite, Elara Thorne stood alone, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her pregnancy. Her husband, CEO Julian Thorne, was already across the room, his laughter mixing with that of his stunning mistress, Chloe. Then, the unthinkable happened. A shove, a cruel laugh, and the sharp, shocking impact of a stiletto heel against Elara's side. As Julian smirked at his wife's pain, a voice like thunder cut through the silence. "Enough!" The man who spoke was a myth, a billionaire recluse, and he was about to end Julian's entire world. The invitation had felt less like a request and more like a summons. It was printed on cardstock, so thick and creamy, it seemed edible. The embossed gold lettering of the Metropolitan Philanthropic Gala glittering under the light. For Elara Thorne, it was just another night of performance. At 7 months pregnant, the performance was becoming more difficult. The silk of her emerald maternity gown, custom-made by a designer Julian insisted upon, felt like a beautiful shroud, clinging uncomfortably in the humid October air. Julian Thorne, her husband, adjusted his tuxedo cuffs in the back of the towned car. He hadn't looked at her. Not really, in weeks. His gaze was perpetually fixed on his phone, his reflection, or the next rung of the corporate ladder he was so desperate to climb. "Elara, for heaven's sake, try to look radiant," he muttered, his thumb scrolling endlessly. "Arthur Grayson is rumored to be here tonight. The Arthur Grayson. A word with him, just one, could elevate Thorne Dynamics from a major player to the player." Elara pressed a hand to her lower back, where a dull ache had settled. "I will try, Julian. It's just, this dress is tight." "It cost more than your father's annual salary. It's not tight, it's fitted," he snapped. "Just smile, look adoringly at me, and stay away from the canapes. It's unbecoming." The car slid to a stop in front of the Astoria Grand. The facade was a symphony of limestone and light, a fortress of old money. Paparazzi flashes exploded like small bombs, illuminating the red carpet. Julian's hand found her back, not in a gesture of support, but of propulsion. He pushed her forward, his smile wide and false for the cameras. Elara navigated the gauntlet of flashing lights on unsteady heels. She was the perfect accessory, the beautiful, silent, and now visibly pregnant wife of the man of the hour, Julian Thorne. His tech company, Thorne Dynamics, had recently secured a massive city contract, and this gala was meant to be his coronation. Inside, the ballroom was breathtaking. It was a sea of black ties, glittering diamonds, and the low, confident hum of generational wealth. Waiters, impeccably dressed, moved like ghosts, offering flutes of champagne that Elara politely declined, accepting a glass of sparkling water instead. "Ah, Julian, marvelous to see you." A portly man, Councilman Davies, clapped Julian on the back. "Richard, a pleasure. You know my wife, Elara." Davies gave her a cursory glance, his eyes lingering on her swollen abdomen with a flicker of disinterest. Yes. Blooming. Now, Julian, about that zoning variance." Elara was dismissed. She was used to it. She became a ghost herself, drifting to the edge of the room, her hand instinctively cradling the life inside her. She watched Julian work the crowd. He was magnetic, she had to admit. His dark hair, his sharp suit, the easy, predatory charm that had once captivated her. Now, it just looked like a mask. She had met him 3 years ago. She was a junior curator at a small art gallery. He was an ambitious executive on the rise. He had swept her off her feet with whirlwind dates, passionate declarations, and promises of a life she'd only read about. Her quiet, academic family had been wary, but Elara was in love. The wedding was a lavish affair. The reality, however, set in quickly. Julian's charm was a tool deployed for investors and clients, but rarely for her. He was controlling, dismissive, and obsessed with appearances. When she found out she was pregnant, she had cried with joy, hoping it would bring them closer. Instead, it seemed to push them further apart. The baby was, to him, another box checked. The heir to Thorn dynamics. Her gaze drifted across the room and landed on a woman in a crimson dress, so tight it seemed painted on. The woman's laughter was loud, a sharp, metallic sound. Her name was Chloe Vance. She was Julian's new head of strategic marketing. Elara was not naive. She had seen the late-night texts, the lingering touches at company parties, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Chloe was everything Elara was not. Sharp, ambitious, and utterly unencumbered. As if sensing her gaze, Chloe looked directly at her. She didn't look away or blush with shame. She raised her champagne flute in a slow, deliberate toast, a smirk playing on her perfectly painted red lips. Julian was standing right next to her, laughing at something she'd said, oblivious, or worse, complicit. Elara's stomach tightened with something far colder than the baby's kick. She felt the familiar sting of humiliation. She turned away, focusing on a massive ice sculpture of a swan, and pretended to be fascinated by its melting wings. "You really shouldn't be here, you know." The voice was like honey laced with venom. Elara turned. Chloe Vance stood beside her, smelling strongly of champagne and expensive, heavy perfume. "Excuse me?" Elara said, her voice barely a whisper. "This event, it's for the sharks, darling, not the whales." Chloe's eyes raked over Elara's body, the disgust in her gaze palpable. Elara stiffened. "I am here supporting my husband." "Are you?" Chloe laughed, taking a delicate sip. "Because from where I'm standing, I'm the one supporting him. You're just the ballast, the dutiful, boring anchor. He needs a speedboat, Elara, not a barge." Each word was a precise, calculated cut. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. She looked for Julian, but he was deep in conversation with the senator, his back to them. "You should be at home," Chloe continued, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "Knitting, or whatever it is you people do. You're an embarrassment to him. That dress is a tent, and you look pale. He's ashamed of you." "That's not true," Elara whispered, but the lack of conviction in her own voice pained her. "Isn't it? He hasn't touched you in months, but he can't get enough of me." Chloe ran a hand down her own, impossibly flat stomach. He tells me how you just lie there, like a martyr. It's pathetic." Tears, hot and sudden, pricked Elara's eyes. She would not cry. Not here. She turned to walk away, to find a quiet alcove, a bathroom, anywhere but here. "Don't you walk away from me," Chloe hissed, grabbing her arm. Elara snatched her arm back. "Don't touch me. Or what? You'll cry? You'll tell Julian?" Chloe's face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "He doesn't care." Chloe took a half-step back, as if to admire her handiwork. She then tripped over the leg of a nearby table, stumbling forward. It was a clumsy, theatrical movement, but it gave her the momentum she needed. As she fell, she swung her leg, the stiletto heel of her crimson shoe aimed directly at Elara's swollen stomach. Elara, startled, tried to twist away, but she was too slow. The heel didn't hit the baby directly. Instead, it struck her hip and side with a sickening, sharp impact. It wasn't a gentle tap, it was a kick, fueled by jealousy and spite. Elara cried out, a sharp gasp of pain and shock, stumbling backward. She crashed into a waiter's tray, sending glasses of champagne shattering onto the marble floor. The music stopped. The ballroom, moments before a sea of noise, fell into a dead, horrifying silence. Every eye in the room, senators, heiresses, CEOs, was on her. Elara was on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and champagne, her hand clutching her side, her face white with pain. And then she heard it. Julian. Her husband. He was standing 20 feet away, looking at the scene. He wasn't rushing to her side. He wasn't shouting in anger. He laughed. It was a short, sharp, exasperated laugh. "My God, Elara," he called out, his voice dripping with annoyance. "Can't you go 5 minutes without causing a scene? Utterly clumsy." Chloe, now standing upright, brushed off her dress, a look of faux innocence on her face. "Oh, goodness, I'm so sorry, Julian. I just tripped. And she just fell over." Julian shook his head, looking at his business partners with an apologetic grin. "Women," he said, as if that explained everything. He started to walk toward Chloe, not Elara. Elara felt a pain sharper than the heel. It was the sound of his laughter. It was the final, devastating proof of his contempt. She looked down, tears blurring her vision, and saw a small, dark shape moving from the shadows at the far end of the room. A man who had been sitting alone at a table in the back, unseen and unnoticed, stood up. He was older, with a shock of white hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore an impeccably tailored, simple black suit, but he commanded the room with an authority that dwarfed everyone, including Julian. He began to walk forward, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He didn't rush. He moved with a deliberate, chilling calm. He walked past the senator, past Councilman Davies, past Julian himself. He stopped directly in front of Julian and Chloe. His voice, when he spoke, was not a shout, but it was so powerful it vibrated through the entire ballroom. "Enough!" The word hit like a physical blow. Julian, mid-smirk, froze. The billionaire recluse, Arthur Grayson, turned his ice-blue eyes on Julian Thorne. "You," Grayson said, his voice low and dangerous. "You laughed." The silence in the Astoria ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and polite chatter out of the room. Julian Thorne's dismissive laugh died in his throat, his face frozen in a grotesque mask of surprise. He had been focused on the power players, the senators, the old money families. He had never even registered the man at the back table. Now, that man stood before him, and the aura of power rolling off him was suffocating. I beg your pardon," Julian stammered, attempting to regain his composure. "It was an accident. My wife she's prone to hysterics." Arthur Grayson didn't even look at Julian. His gaze was fixed on Chloe Vance, who had gone from triumphant to terrified in a single second. Her face was as pale as the tablecloths. "You," Grayson said, his voice flat. "You kicked a pregnant woman." "No, I tripped," Chloe cried, her voice suddenly shrill. "It was an accident. I would never—" "I have been watching you for 10 minutes, Grayson cut her off. His words were precise, each one a hammer blow. "You baited her. You insulted her. You blocked her path. And then you kicked her. It was perhaps the most cowardly and despicable thing I have ever witnessed in this ballroom. And I have witnessed some truly despicable things here." He then turned his gaze to Julian. It was, Elara thought, like watching a glacier move, slow, unstoppable, and capable of crushing mountains. "And you? You are her husband. You stood 20 feet away and you laughed. You humiliated her to protect this." He gestured to Chloe with a wave of his hand, as if dismissing a piece of trash. Julian's face flushed a dark, angry red. This was his night. This man, whoever he was ruining it. "Now see here," Julian blustered, puffing out his chest. "I don't know who you think you are, but you are interrupting a private matter. This is my wife. She is your wife, and that is your crime," Grayson said. He finally turned his head, his piercing blue eyes finding Elara, still on the floor, cradling her side. The look in his eyes was not pity. It was something else, a deep, profound, and ancient anger. Two waiters, finally snapping out of their shock, rushed to Elara's side. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one asked, offering a hand. "I think so," Elara whispered, allowing them to help her to her feet. She clutched her side. The baby, thankfully, gave a small, reassuring flutter, as if in protest. Grayson watched her stand, his expression softening for a fraction of a second, before hardening again as he turned back to Julian. "A private matter, you said," Grayson continued, his voice dangerously quiet. "You come to this gala, a night dedicated to philanthropy, to helping the vulnerable. You stand in front of that banner," he pointed to the large Metropolitan Philanthropic Gala sign, "and you publicly endorse the abuse of your pregnant wife at the hands of your mistress. You are a cancer, Mr. Thorne, a rot." Julian's mind was racing. Who was this man? He was old, but he wore his suit with an authority Julian had only seen in boardrooms that could buy and sell his entire company. He looked vaguely familiar, like a face from a newspaper financial section 10 years ago. "You have no right," Julian hissed, "to speak to me this way. Do you have any idea who I am?" A low, dry chuckle rumbled in Arthur Grayson's chest. "Oh, yes. I know exactly who you are. Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Dynamics. You build navigation systems for shipping containers. You're leveraged to the hilt with the First National Bank. You're desperate to land the Grayson Global Shipping contract. And you just bought a condo in the new Phoenix Tower you can't afford. You put a $30,000 watch on your wrist, but you haven't paid the caterer for your last company retreat. You are a house of cards, son, a hollow man." Julian's blood ran cold. "The Grayson Global contract." "Grayson. You," Julian's voice cracked. "You're Arthur Grayson." The name dropped into the room like a bomb. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Arthur Grayson. The Arthur Grayson. The reclusive, almost mythical billionaire. He hadn't been seen at a public event in a decade. He was the owner of Grayson Global, a logistics and tech empire that spanned continents. He was, as Julian had said, not a player. He was the player, and Julian had just told him to mind his own business. Chloe Vance looked as if she were about to faint. "I am," Grayson said simply. He looked past Julian, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Mr. Harrison, Ms. Dubois." A man and a woman at the front table, the heads of the gala committee, stood up immediately, their faces ashen. "Mr. Grayson," the man, Harrison, said, his voice trembling. "We had no idea you were. We are so honored by your presence." "Don't be," Grayson said. "I came tonight to announce a new endowment for the Children's Hospital Wing, a $50 million endowment." A hopeful murmur went through the room. "That endowment is, of course, now withdrawn." The murmur turned into a collective groan. Harrison looked like he might weep. "What?" "No," Harrison said. "Mr. Grayson, please, this was a personal dispute. It has nothing to do with the charity. It has everything to do with it," Grayson snapped. "You host an event for charity, yet you allow this sickness to fester in your ballroom. You all stood here. You watched. You saw a woman assaulted, and you waited. You waited to see who was more important before you decided how to react. You were all complicit in your silence." He turned back to Julian, whose entire future was dissolving in real time. "The Grayson Global contract," Julian whispered, his bravado gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading tone. "Arthur, Mr. Grayson, please. This is a misunderstanding. Chloe she's unstable. I was in shock." Chloe looked at him, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Julian, you told me to be firm with her." "Shut up, Chloe," Julian shrieked, his mask of control shattering completely. You're fired, you hear me?" "You can't fire her," Grayson said calmly. "Of course I can. It's my company." "Not anymore," Grayson said. He pulled a phone from his pocket. "I am the majority shareholder of the First National Bank, Mr. Thorne, the bank that holds all your company's debt. I also happen to be personal friends with every single member of your board. I am calling in your loans, all of them. Effective Monday morning, your board will be holding an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. to accept your resignation. By noon, you will be an unemployed man in a very expensive, unpaid-for suit." Julian staggered back, his hand grabbing the back of a chair for support. No, you can't. That's my life's work." "Your life's work has been built on deceit and cruelty," Grayson said. "It ends tonight." Grayson put his phone away. He looked at the Gala committee. "My endowment is gone, and I will be speaking to every major donor I know by morning. I suggest you find a new ballroom for next year. The Astoria Grand will not be hosting you. My family owns this hotel." That was the final blow. The Gala was not just ruined, it was annihilated. Arthur Grayson walked past the paralyzed forms of Julian and Chloe. He stopped in front of Ilara, who was standing, shaking, attended by the waiters. His gaze was no longer angry. It was soft and filled with a pain that she didn't understand. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle. I don't think so," Ilara said. "My side is sore. I don't know why you did this." Julian, seeing this, saw one last, desperate chance. "Yes, Mr. Grayson, why? Why are you doing this? You don't even know this woman." Arthur Grayson looked at Ilara, and his eyes were sad. "He doesn't know, does he, child?" Ilara looked confused. "Know what?" Arthur sighed. He looked back at Julian, his face a mask of contempt. "You worthless, ignorant fool," Arthur Grayson said, his voice filling the room once more. "You didn't just marry a curator. You married Ilara Rosalind Thorne." Julian looked blank. "So?" Grayson shook his head in disgust. "My sister, Eleanor, died 25 years ago. She died giving birth to her only child. Her husband, a quiet professor, was my dearest friend. He raised that child alone, protecting her from my world, from the world of people like you. He raised her to be kind and intelligent and good. He died last year." He turned back to Ilara and gently tilted her chin up. "He named her after my sister, Ilara. Her middle name is Rosalind." Grayson looked back at the stunned crowd. "My full name," he announced, "is Arthur Rosalind Grayson. This is my niece. This is my sister's child. This is the only family I have left in the world." He looked at Julian. "You didn't just kick a pregnant woman, Mr. Thorne. You kicked the heiress to the entire Grayson global empire, and you did it in front of me." The revelation hung in the air, heavier and more opulent than the crystal chandeliers. Ilara Grayson Thorne, was the heiress to one of the largest private fortunes on the continent. Ilara herself looked the most stunned of all. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the imposing man before her. "Uncle, Arthur," she whispered. The name felt foreign on her tongue. She had known, of course, that her mother, Eleanor, had a brother. Her father, a gentle academic man named Dr. Miles Landon, had spoken of him, but only in hushed, mournful tones. He was lost to the world, her father used to say. A man who had built an empire, but had forgotten the family in its foundation. Her father had wanted a different life for her, a life of books, art, and quiet integrity, far from the corrosive influence of extreme wealth. "My father," Elara began, "he told me that you weren't interested, that you wanted nothing to do with us." Arthur Grayson's stern facade cracked, just for a moment. A deep, profound sadness filled his eyes. "Your father, Miles, was a good man, a better man than me. When my sister died, I couldn't bear it. I saw her in your face, and I was building my world, and I was a coward. I told Miles to raise you in his world, to keep you safe from mine. I thought my money would only poison you. I kept my distance, to protect you. I failed. I see that now." He looked at her, then at her swollen stomach. "I see I failed you most profoundly." Julian Thorne, meanwhile, was processing the information. The shock was receding, replaced by a frantic, horrifying calculation. He hadn't just married a poor, naive curator. He had married the golden goose, and for 3 years he had been kicking it. "Elara, darling," he sputtered, stumbling forward. He shoved Chloe Vance out of his way. She fell against a table, unnoticed. "My love, why didn't you tell me?" He reached for her hand. Elara flinched, pulling it away as if his touch were fire. "Tell you?" she whispered, her voice trembling, no longer with fear, but with a cold, dawning rage. "Tell you what, Julian? That I had a secret, mythical, billionaire uncle I'd never met. I didn't know. But your family. The inheritance." Julian was practically vibrating. His mind was exploding with the possibilities. The debt, the contract. It could all be saved. He just had to pivot. "Mr. Grayson, Arthur, sir," he said, turning to the billionaire, his face a grotesque mask of subservience. "This is all a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. A lover's spat. You know how it is. Chloe, she means nothing. She's a manipulative snake. I was trying to let her down easy. For Elara's sake. To protect her, you see. Her condition. The stress." Arthur Grayson watched him grovel, his expression one of utter revulsion. "You are truly pathetic, Mr. Thorne. You pivot from abuser to sycophant in the blink of an eye. You think this changes anything? You think her name saves you? It condemns you." "But she's my wife," Julian insisted, his voice rising in panic. "And that's my child." He pointed at Elara's stomach. "Your grandnephew, your blood. You can't destroy the father of your only family." This was his trump card. The baby. The heir. Arthur Grayson smiled. It was a terrifying, mirthless expression. "The child. Yes. The child is a Grayson. The child will be protected. The child will want for nothing. The child will be raised with love, integrity, and honor." He took a step closer to Julian, lowering his voice so only those nearby could hear. "But that child will never know your name. You will have no part in its life." "You can't do that," Julian shrieked. "I have rights. I am the father." "And I," Arthur said, his voice a steel whip, "am Arthur Grayson. Do you honestly believe your rights will stand against the Grayson legal team? I will spend half my fortune to ensure you are legally excised from her life. You will sign away your parental rights, Mr. Thorne, or I will personally see to it that you are investigated for tax evasion, wire fraud, and... let's see." He tapped his chin. "Ah, yes. Criminal endangerment of an unborn child. Your mistress's kick was assault. Your laughter was conspiracy. Julian's face went white. He knew Grayson wasn't bluffing. Ilara, who had been watching this exchange, finally found her voice. It was no longer the whisper of a victim. It was clear, cold, and steady. "He's right, Julian." Julian turned to her, his eyes wide with a final, desperate hope. "Ilara, baby, no. Listen to me. We can fix this. We can be a family. You, me, the baby, your uncle. We can be powerful." Ilara looked at him. She saw him, really saw him, for the first time. Not as the charming man who had courted her, or the cold husband who had ignored her, but as a hollow shell. A weak, craven opportunist who saw her, her child, and her family as nothing but assets on a balance sheet. "The man I married," Ilara said, her voice echoing in the silent room, "died a long time ago. Or perhaps he never existed at all. You laughed." That one word sealed his fate. It was the one thing she could not and would not forgive. "You laughed while that woman kicked me, kicked your own child. You humiliated me because you thought I was worthless. You stood there and you smirked." She took a step forward, and for the first time, Julian stepped back. She was no longer the shrinking wallflower. She was the woman who had just inherited the earth. "You're right about one thing," Ilara said. "My uncle is going to destroy you. But he's not doing it to you. He's doing it for me, and I am going to let him." She held his gaze, her own clear and unwavering. "I want a divorce, and you will never, ever see my child." Julian Thorne crumbled. It wasn't a dramatic fall. It was an inward collapse. His shoulders slumped, the blood drained from his face, and the arrogant CEO vanished, leaving only a terrified, defeated man. He looked at Arthur Grayson, then at Ilara, then at the hundreds of staring, judgmental faces of the city's elite, his peers, his targets, his world. They were all looking at him with undisguised contempt. He was no longer the man of the hour. He was a pariah. From the side, a new voice cut in. "Well, this is certainly a development." It was Chloe Vance. She had picked herself up. Her crimson dress was rumpled, her hair slightly askew, but the terror had been replaced by a new, frantic, reptilian cunning. She ignored Julian completely. She looked directly at Arthur Grayson. "Mr. Grayson," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "What a despicable man. I am appalled. I had no idea Julian was this monstrous." Julian's head snapped up. "What? You kicked her?" "I was forced," Chloe said, tears welling in her eyes, tears that were shockingly convincing. "Julian, he's a tyrant. He threatened my job, my family. He told me Ilara was unstable, that she was a threat to herself. He said I had to make her leave the party. He controlled me. I was terrified of him. We all were." She was trying to flip the narrative, to paint herself as another victim of Julian's tyranny. Arthur Grayson simply raised an eyebrow. "Is that so, Ms. Vance?" "Yes, absolutely. I would never, ever hurt another woman. I'm a feminist. He's the monster. I'll testify. I'll tell you everything. All the skeletons in his corporate closet. The offshore accounts. The creative accounting for the city contract. I know everything." She was offering Julian's head on a platter in exchange for her own survival. Julian looked at her, his face a mask of pure hatred. You treacherous." Before he could finish, Ilara spoke again, her voice cutting through Chloe's performance. "She's lying, Uncle Arthur." Arthur looked at his niece. "She came to me," Ilara said, her voice ringing with clarity. She told me I was a whale and a barge. She told me my husband was ashamed of me and that he couldn't get enough of her. She wasn't scared. She was proud. She did this because she hates me." Ilara looked at Chloe. "You are just as hollow as he is. You are both parasites." Chloe's face hardened. The tears vanished. The mask was off. You pregnant cow. You think you've won? You're still just a boring little mouse who got lucky with a rich uncle." Before Chloe could take another step, two large men in dark suits, the Astoria Grand's head of security, materialized on either side of her. "Miss Vance," Arthur said, his voice bored. "You are trespassing, and you are under arrest for assault. These gentlemen will hold you until the police arrive." "You can't!" Chloe shrieked as they each took an arm. "It was an accident. Julian, tell them." Julian Thorne didn't say a word. He just stared into the middle distance, his world in ashes. Arthur Grayson turned his back on them both. He shed his suit jacket, and, in a gesture of paternal tenderness that shocked the room, draped it over Ilara's shoulders. "Let's go home, Ilara," he said softly. I don't have a home, Uncle," she whispered, the adrenaline fading, leaving her exhausted. "My home. It was his." "No," Arthur said, placing a steadying arm around her. "Your home is with me. It always was. I was too foolish to see it." He guided her through the parted crowd. The elite of the city, who had ignored her all night, now watched her with a mixture of awe, fear, and respect. She walked past her husband, her head held high, wrapped in the jacket of the most powerful man in the room. As she passed the shattered champagne glasses, she didn't even look down. The ride from the Astoria Grand was a blur. Ilara remembered the silent, respectful parting of the crowd, the flashbulbs of the paparazzi, now aimed at her, not as an accessory, but as the main event. She saw the confused and terrified face of Julian being blocked by security as he tried to follow them, and the animalistic fury in Chloe's expression as she was escorted away by police officers who had arrived with shocking speed. Arthur Grayson's car was not a flashy limousine. It was a dark, impossibly sleek Bentley, the kind of car that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. The interior was silent, smelling of old leather and wood. Ilara sat, her hands folded in her lap, the weight of Arthur's jacket, a heavy, comforting presence. She was still shaking. "My driver will take your things from Julian's apartment tomorrow," Arthur said, his voice gentle as he stared out the window at the city lights. "You will, of course, never have to see him again. The legal team will handle everything." "Uncle Arthur," Ilara's voice was small. I'm so sorry. You lost your endowment. All those people. It's my fault." Arthur turned to her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Ilara, let me be perfectly clear. That $50 million was a rounding error. It was an object. I would have burned this entire city to the ground, with every person in it, before I let that creature lay a hand on you and go unpunished. Do you understand me? Money is a tool. Family is the only thing that is real." He looked away, a flicker of that old pain crossing his features. "I forgot that. For a very long time. Your father, Miles, he never forgot. He tried to tell me. He told me I was building a fortress of money, but that I was living in it alone. He was right. He missed you," Ilara whispered. "He kept a picture of you and my mother, from when you were children, on his desk. He said you were the only one who could make her laugh." A single difficult tear traced a path down Arthur Grayson's weathered cheek. He cleared his throat, regaining his composure. He was a good man, and he raised a good daughter. The car left the glittering chaos of Manhattan, crossing a bridge into the quieter, older precincts of the state. It drove for nearly an hour, finally turning onto a long, private road marked by a simple, unassuming stone gate. The road wound through a forest of ancient oaks before opening up to reveal the house. It wasn't a house. It was, as her father had described, a fortress. A sprawling, magnificent estate of dark stone and glass perched on a hill, overlooking the distant, twinkling lights of the city. It was modern, yet timeless. It was the home of a man who owned the world, but wanted no part in it. The car stopped. A butler, a kind-faced man in his 60s, opened Ilara's door. "Welcome home, Miss Ilara," he said, his voice warm. "My name is Thomas. We are so very glad you are here." You knew I was coming?" Ilara asked, stepping out into the crisp night air. "We have always been prepared for your arrival, ma'am," Thomas said, with a small smile. Arthur led her inside. The interior was not the cold, sterile museum she expected. It was filled with books, comfortable furniture, and priceless art, not as trophies, but as things to be lived with. A massive fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow over the room. "Thomas, have Dr. Alistair meet us in the library, and have a room prepared for Miss Ilara, the east wing, the one overlooking the gardens." "It's already prepared, sir," Thomas replied. "A doctor?" Ilara asked, a new wave of panic rising. "Is it the baby? The kick?" "It is a precaution," Arthur said firmly, guiding her to a plush sofa. "Dr. Alistair has been my personal physician for 30 years. He is the best. He will check on you and the child. Nothing will happen to either of you. I swear it." Moments later, a silver-haired man with a gentle demeanor entered the room. He examined Ilara with quiet efficiency. He checked her side, which was already blooming into a dark, ugly bruise. He listened to the baby's heartbeat with a portable monitor. After a few tense moments, a strong, steady thump, thump, thump filled the quiet library. Ilara burst into tears. It wasn't sadness or fear. It was relief. A deep, shuddering wave of it that released all the tension of the night, of the last 3 years. "The baby is strong," Dr. Alistair announced, smiling. "A very healthy, very active heartbeat. Your hip and side took the brunt of the impact. It will be a nasty bruise, and you'll be sore, but you and the child are perfectly, wonderfully fine." Arthur Grayson, who had been standing by the window, rigid as a statue, closed his eyes and let out a long, slow breath. "Thank you, James," Arthur said. "That will be all." After the doctor left, Thomas returned with a tray, a simple chamomile tea, Miss Ilara, and some warm broth. "You've had a difficult night." Ilara ate, the warmth spreading through her. The exhaustion was complete. "I don't understand," she said, setting the cup down. You were there, at the gala. Why? You haven't been to one in years." Arthur sat in the armchair across from her. The firelight played on his face. "I wasn't there for the gala," he said. "I was there for you." Ilara looked at him, confused. "When your father passed away last year, I didn't attend the funeral. It was my final act of cowardice, but I made a promise to his memory. I would watch over you, even if you never knew it. I had my security team keep a discreet, distant watch, not to intrude, but to protect." He leaned forward. "They reported to me, Ilara. They told me about Julian, about his debts, about his marketing executive. I knew he was a worthless degenerate. I've spent the last 6 months preparing to remove him from your life. I've been acquiring his bank's debt, placing my own people on his board, gathering leverage. I was planning to handle it quietly, to buy him out force the divorce, and settle you comfortably, all without you ever knowing I was involved. But why were you there tonight? My team's report this afternoon, Arthur said, his voice grim. It said Julian had been cruel to you this week, that he had instructed you to look the part tonight. And they told me Chloe Vance was on the guest list. I had a feeling, a deep, cold feeling that he was planning to parade her, to humiliate you publicly. I couldn't let that happen. I came to the gala not as a donor, but as a bodyguard. I sat in the back. I watched. I was going to let him play out his little scene, then I was going to pull you aside and begin the extraction. He clenched his fists. I never, in my darkest nightmares, imagined they would physically assault you. When she kicked you, and he laughed. Arthur's voice dropped to a growl. All my careful, quiet plans went out the window. I decided, in that instant, that quiet was no longer an option. He deserved public annihilation. They both did. Ilara stared at him, trying to absorb the sheer scale of his power, of his hidden protection. He had been a ghost in her life, a guardian angel made of stock portfolios and security details. You've been watching me? Always, he said softly. From the day you were born. I have every painting you drew as a child, every academic paper you wrote in college, when you got that job at the gallery. I was the anonymous donor who funded the exhibit you curated. Ilara's head was spinning. Her entire life, the small, quiet world she thought she had built on her own, had been scaffolded by his invisible hand. Now, he said, standing up, you need to rest. Thomas will show you to your room. We have much to discuss in the morning. The lawyers, the divorce, and most importantly, the nursery. Ilara stood, still wrapped in his jacket. Uncle Arthur. He paused. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You saved me. He looked at her, his blue eyes clear. No, Ilara. You saved me. I was a very rich, very old man, sitting alone in a fortress, waiting to die. And tonight you gave me a reason to live. You gave me a war to fight. And you gave me a family. He smiled, a true, warm smile that transformed his harsh features. Now go. Sleep. The world will be a very different place for you when you wake up. Ilara followed Thomas down a long, art-filled hallway to the east wing. The room was larger than her entire apartment. A fire was lit, the bed was turned down, and through the massive windows she could see a sprawling, moonlit garden. She slipped out of the emerald gown, leaving it on the floor like a snakeskin she had shed. She climbed into the bed, the sheets impossibly soft, and for the first time in 3 years she felt completely, utterly safe. Her hand went to her stomach, to the steady, strong life within. We're safe, she whispered to the baby. We're finally safe. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard the faint, distant sound of Arthur Grayson's voice from the library. He was on the phone. His voice was no longer gentle. It was cold, precise, and utterly ruthless. Yes, that's correct. 9 a.m. Call the loans, force the vote, and find out everything about Ms. Chloe Vance. Her family, her debts, her previous employers, everything. By morning, I want to own her past, her present, and her future. Yes, she will regret the day she was born. Monday morning arrived with the clinical finality of an execution. While Ilara awoke to the sound of bird song and the scent of fresh pastries in her sun-drenched suite, Julian Thorne awoke to a symphony of destruction. His first call was from his bank. A cold, unfamiliar vice president informed him that per the terms of his consolidated business loans, First National was calling in his entire $87 million credit line, effective immediately. Julian, still in his silk pajamas, could only stammer, "But why? I've never missed a payment. The bank has reason to believe the debtor, Thorn Dynamics, is in a precarious financial position, and that its CEO represents an untenable liability." The voice read from a script. The line clicked dead. Before Julian could even process this, his phone buzzed again. It was the chairman of his own board. "Julian," the man's voice was grim. "We've called an emergency meeting. 9 a.m. You need to be here." "Frank, what the hell is going on? The bank just called in my loans." "I know, Julian. We all know. We've all been contacted by Mr. Grayson's people." There was a new, chilling respect in his voice. "He's right, Julian. You're a liability. Your personal conduct. My God, man. It's on every gossip blog. CEO laughs as Mistress kicks pregnant heiress." He sent us the security footage, high definition, from 3 different angles. "It wasn't an accident. The board is voting. We're offering you a choice. Resign, effective immediately, or we will fire you. For cause." Julian arrived at his glass-walled office at 8:50 a.m. He was met not by his assistant, but by 2 security guards. "Mr. Thorn, we've been instructed to escort you to the boardroom, and then to escort you from the premises." The board meeting lasted 12 minutes. Julian, grey-faced and trembling, tried to speak, to apologize, to bargain. They just stared at him, their faces cold. They had all received calls from Arthur Grayson. Their choice was simple: side with the disgraced CEO or side with the man who held their futures. At 9:12 a.m., Julian Thorn signed his resignation. He was given a cardboard box for his personal effects. As he was walked out of the lobby, past employees who refused to meet his eye, he saw his name already being scraped from the glass door. He stepped out onto the street, unemployed, disgraced, and carrying a box. He tried to call his lawyer, only to be informed that the firm had a conflict of interest and could no longer represent him. He went to his condo, the one Arthur Grayson had mentioned, only to find a foreclosure notice taped to the door. He was locked out. In a blind panic, he called the only person he could think of. Chloe Vance picked up on the 5th ring, her voice a ragged, terrified sob. "Julian! Julian, you have to help me!" "Help you!" Julian shrieked into the phone. "I'm ruined. I have nothing. It's all gone." They arrested me," Chloe wept. "I spent the night in a cell, Julian. They charged me with assault, and this morning, my apartment. They're evicting me. My car, it's been repossessed. My credit cards, they're all declined. He's erasing me, Julian." Arthur Grayson hadn't just destroyed their futures, he had seized their pasts. Chloe's marketing degree was found to be fraudulent. The offshore accounts Julian had been so proud of were flagged for an immediate IRS audit. The city contract was now under investigation for bribery, using Chloe's own Gala testimony as the basis. Julian sank onto a public bench, homeless, penniless, and unemployable. Meanwhile, in the tranquil library of the Grayson estate, Ilara sat across from a team of sharp, empathetic lawyers. "The divorce will be simple, Ilara," the lead lawyer, Anne, explained. "Given the public nature of the adultery and the assault, we can file on grounds of extreme cruelty. Julian will not contest it." He will sign away his rights to the baby?" Ilara asked, her hand on her stomach. "He will," Anne said, "in exchange for Mr. Grayson's generosity." Generosity? Mr. Grayson has offered to stop the criminal proceedings against him. The fraud, the bribery, he'll let the IRS handle that. But the assault charges, he'll drop those, and he'll provide Mr. Thorn with a small, one-time payment. Enough to disappear. "Why?" Ilara asked, shocked. After what he did, why give him anything? It's not for him, Anne said gently. It's for you and for the child. This way, there is no messy, public trial. He signs, he vanishes, and your child grows up, never having to read a single article about that night. Mr. Grayson is buying your peace. And Miss Vance. Anne's smile was thin. Miss Vance is a different matter. She has no leverage. She has no value. She will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and Mr. Grayson's civil suit against her for emotional distress will ensure that she will be paying you for the rest of her natural life. Elara felt a chill, but it was not unpleasant. It was the chill of justice. Elara, Arthur Grayson said, walking into the room. The board has accepted his resignation. It's done. He looked at her, and his face was serious. There is one last piece of business. Thorn Dynamics. It's floundering. It will be bankrupt by Friday. The board, they have made an offer. To sell. To me. For pennies on the dollar. You're buying his company? I am, Arthur said, but I'm not going to run it. He placed a hand on the file. You, he said, are a brilliant woman. Your father told me you had a mind for structure and ethics. Thorn Dynamics needs a new CEO, someone who can rebuild it with integrity. Elara's eyes widened. Me? Uncle? I'm 7 months pregnant. I don't know anything about shipping logistics. You will learn, Arthur said with absolute confidence. You will take a year for your maternity leave. I will install a trusted interim CEO. When you are ready, you will have a corner office waiting for you. You will rebuild that company in your own image. You will not be the wife of a CEO, Elara. You are the CEO. That is the final, fitting justice. Elara looked at the file, at the Thorn Dynamics logo, the name that had been her cage. No, she said, her voice firm. Arthur looked surprised. I won't be CEO of Thorn Dynamics, she said. I will be the CEO of the Landon Grayson Corporation, after my father and my mother. We will build something new. Arthur Grayson looked at his niece, and his smile was brighter than the city lights. Yes, he said. Yes, we will. The following months brought quiet transformation. Julian Thorne, broken, signed away his parental rights and vanished with a one-time payment. Chloe Vance, facing undeniable video evidence at her trial, was convicted of assault. She was sentenced to prison, her future wages garnished by a civil suit. While their lives ended, Elara's new life bloomed. She thrived at the Grayson estate, watching her Uncle Arthur transform into a doting grand-uncle, obsessed with preparing the nursery. He gave her their mother's locket, calling family the real inheritance, not money. Weeks later, during a snowstorm, Elara gave birth to a healthy boy, Miles Arthur Grayson. Holding her son, with a tearful Arthur by her side, Elara felt a profound love and safety. The Gala's horror, she realized, had been the violent prelude to her freedom, bringing her home to her true family. 1 year later, the Metropolitan Gala was a diminished event, its former stars conspicuously absent. Miles away, Elara Landon stood in the CEO's office, once Julian's, now hers. The Landon Grayson Corporation was thriving under her ethical leadership. Her office, now bright and modern, held a picture of her son, Miles. Arthur Grayson entered, having just put the baby to sleep in the adjoining nursery. They looked out over the city, noting the gala they had rejected. Elara now sent donations directly to shelters, not to parties that ignore cruelty. She thought of Julian, a bartender overseas, and Chloe, a telemarketer. They were pathetic footnotes. A year ago, she was a broken victim. Tonight, she was a CEO, a mother, and a battleship steering her own course. The silence of the room was the beginning of her new life. Ilara proved that the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest new beginnings. She wasn't just a victim. She was a leader waiting for a chance, and a family waiting to be found. What Julian meant for evil, her uncle used for her ultimate vindication, proving that true power isn't about the noise you make, but the changes you create. What did you think of Ilara's transformation? Do you believe Julian and Chloe got the justice they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and insights mean the world to me. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Thank you for listening.